let's get back to who created Mickey Mouse. And the book was titled A Mouse Divided: How Ub Iwerks Became Forgotten and Walt Disney Became Uncle Walt by Jeff Ryan. Now, I got obsessed with the book A Mouse Divided. I thought, would it be possible to get Jeff Ryan to come on the show? Would he do such a thing? I don't know the guy. So I emailed him, and much to my delight, he graciously agreed to join us. So, Jeff, welcome. Welcome to A Walk with Walt. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Carrie, Mindy, and all of the walkers with Walt.
Oh, I love it. We're going to call them walkers. That's fantastic. You
That's a
just
good one.
gave
I
our
never thought of
listeners a
that.
name.
Well,
Jeff.
walkers is also the nickname for the zombies in the Walking Dead
That's
television
right.
show. So,
That's right.
Tell us how and why you wrote this book. Now, you never went to Disney as a kid, did you?
no, not only did I not go to Disney, I don't think I saw a single Mickey Mouse cartoon. Now I'm of Generation X, and I grew up with the Disney Channel in the 1980s, and they didn't show cartoons that often. They had a lot of Mouser size, but they didn't have that many cartoons. And when they did, it wasn't the old cartoons. And when it was the old cartoons, it was Goofy's. And I loved the Goofy cartoons. I loved them so much, and I saw Donald Ducks, and those were great too. And then they throw in a Mickey every once in a while, just for a few seconds, and he didn't seem that funny. It was like I love Donald Duck, and I can't get enough of Goofy, but Mickey doesn't seem to have any pizzazz going with him. I don't get what the appeal is. And that was me up until 10 years ago when I wrote a book all about not Mickey Mouse, but Super Mario. And the way Nintendo made Super Mario popular was by taking every single chapter from the Mickey Mouse playbook that Disney had written. They put Mickey everywhere. Every single game had Mickey in it or had Mario in it somewhere. So they made him not just a branding element, but like the icon. When you thought of Nintendo, you thought of Mario. So I thought, well, if they're copying from the playbook, I want to find out where this playbook came from because Mickey Mouse was the first one to do this. So I got Richard Schickel's book, the Disney version, and I thought, okay, well, this is a good way of starting off to see if there's a story behind the Mickey Mouse creation. And it turned out that Walt Disney and his best friend, who I'd never heard of, who had an unusual name and a crazy backstory, and was one of the great inventors of the 20th century and owned 20% of Disney, he was the guy who co-created him and then left the company because he fought with his best friend and they split up their friendship. It's like, I there's a story. I walked into an actual story here. This is great. And no one had written about this. I couldn't believe it. Mickey, he's Mickey Mouse. The backstory of him is super important for the world.
How did you first hear the name Ub Iwerks?
He was in Richard Schickel's book, the
That book.
Disney
Okay,
version.
right.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And officially, he pronounced his name Oob, but Walt called him Ub, and
Okay.
therefore everyone in the world called him
Wait, wait.
Ub. This is one of the all-time great Ub Iwerks questions. Do you go with
Okay.
Oob or Ub? So
Okay,
either one
Jeff.
is acceptable.
That was my next question. I said, so this debate between me and Carrie have been going on. I said, settle this once and for all. Is it oob or ub? I said oob because I've listened to your books and I'm a very big fan of it's the hand behind the mouse, the Ub Iwerk story. And he pronounced it oob until they mispronounced it. Am I correct? And then they turned it into ub. So when did that happen?
His his name officially is spelled Ubbe, Ubi, but that got Americanized into Ub, although Ub doesn't sound super American. Most people thought he was Dutch, but his family origin was actually Frisian. Frisia is a very small country back when Germany was like 30 different countries that each had its own little castle and 30 miles around. Frisia had its own language as well, and it's up north near the Netherlands. And there still are some Frisian speakers around, but they're considered kind of outliers. You need to speak Dutch or German if you want to get around.
Got it.
So who wins our bet?
I said oob. Carrie says ub.
The thing is, you both get to win the bet because the world called him The world called him Ub, but he called himself Ub.
Yeah, that's what I
The
said. I
wisdom,
was like, it's both.
the wisdom of Solomon. I love that. A lot of your source material. I mean, you have tons of source material, but one was a biography of Walt by Richard uh, Hubler.
I think it's Hubler. Yes.
Hubler. Can you tell us about that book and what is the Boston University Howard Gottlieb Archival Research Center?
Ah,
Tell us.
the Gottlieb Center is where authors will often donate their manuscripts and their collected works. So Hubler was one of the people who donated his works there, and he had written books on a couple of key Vietnam War figures, and he was also hired to write an authorized biography of Walt Disney. And this was happening around the time that Walt died. So just in like the year after he died, he interviewed a lot of Walt's still living family and friends. Now, Hubler had a very particular style of interviewing. He was very fair-minded when he wrote, but he wanted to purposely disarm all the people he was talking to. So if he talked to an animator, he would say, "Oh, Walt, I heard he beats his wife a whole lot. Give me the real detail here." And then the animator might say, "No, he didn't do that, but let me tell you about the guy he chewed out." Or he would say, "I can't, no, Walt never did that at all." And of course, Walt didn't do these things, but the way that he introduced the topics into conversation made a lot of people think he was going to write a rag. He was going to write a terrible, untrue tell all. So he writes his book, he hands it in to the Disney family, and they've had a terrible experience being interviewed by him. And they say, "No, we're not putting this book out. We don't like you." So the book goes on the shelf. And it's just a manuscript and no one ever reads it. However, the manuscript that they turned down still exists in the archive. So I was able to go there and I found out that it existed via some other channels, and I was able to read the whole thing, soup to nuts.
How'd you find out it was there? How'd you know it was there? And
There
how'd you
was
get in
an
the door?
There was another biography that had pulled selected bits from it, but not everything. I decided I was going to take a few days and I was going to read absolutely everything I could. And most everything there were copies of original documents. But do you know the great Russian director Sergei Eisenstein? He did
The
the
sound,
battleship Potemkin.
Oh,
yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah, he's a key figure in early film history. He was apparently a fan of Walt Disney and wrote Walt a letter saying how wonderful he thought Walt was. And Walt rewarded him with an artwork from the Mickey Mouse comic strip, which was an original by Ub Iwerks. So Eisenstein got this and he took a picture with it to send it back to Walt. And the original letter from Sergei Eisenstein is there in the box in Boston University. I couldn't believe it. I was holding it like, this is Sergei Eisenstein's signature. I'm so close to the man. This is amazing.
That's incredible.
And so the book was never completed, just the manuscript was never an finished edited version.
It was more or less edited, and because this was written in the 1960s, before computers or word processors even, I didn't know how someone would work in order to add in quotes. But the way Hubler ended up working was if he would type out his all of his notes, and there were lots of notes in there, which was fantastic to read. And if he liked a particular paragraph, he would physically cut it out from his notes and he would physically staple it onto a piece of paper. So some of the pieces of the paper went 2.5 pages long because there are all these staples going onto it, connecting pages upon pages.
I have a few things here to ask you first. You quote Walt as saying, "I just can't say where the idea came from." Also, you say Walt's creation of Mickey Mouse on a westbound train has become an indelible piece of American lore. It's the cultural equivalent of Betsy Ross sewing the first American flag, George Washington felling the cherry tree, or Abner Doubleday inventing baseball. You wrote, when asked about how Walt came up with Mickey Mouse, he would give a mischievous answer of a storyteller. To truly answer the question, though, would be to tell the story of Walt and Ub's friendship from spirited beginning to bone break dissolution. For the rest of his life, to avoid the pain, Walt told happy lies about a cross-country train trip that was better than reliving the heartbreaking truth. So with all this in mind, can we just cut to the chase? Who created Mickey Mouse?
Okay.
And again, it's a multi-layered answer, as that last paragraph said. But
Right.
who created? Let's just get right to it.
Okay. If you wanted to find Mickey Mouse as a drawing, you can make in about a minute and a half of the guy with two ears and the big round mouth and the belly. Then Ub Iwerks did that. He made Mickey Mouse up in a couple of minutes and made a couple of previous versions of proto mouses, and eventually came up with a Mickey Mouse that everyone in the room agreed upon and that he could draw relatively quickly and would look good when animated. So Ub Iwerks gets full 100% credit for that. Walt gets credit for the idea of making a mouse cartoon, but Ub gets credit for Mickey Mouse as a character design. And Ub also gets credit for making Mickey Mouse because you drew every single frame of the first Mickey Mouse cartoon. However, where it gets complicated is that when people say who invented Mickey Mouse, they mean like the character that you think of, the hail fellow well met guy, the public citizen, the mouse about town. And that took years and years of collective effort. And especially after Ub left the company, Walt was more and more in charge of things, and then people following Walt's lead. So Walt, I think, ultimately gets more of the credit for Mickey's personality and who you think of as Mickey, and why you think of Mickey, because there are plenty of other characters that were invented in 1928 that we don't talk about because they were just a doodle someone made and didn't get popularized. So again, I'm giving an answer where I'm giving both people credit. So Ub came up with Mickey Mouse, no way around it. But at the same time, Walt created the idea of Mickey Mouse way more than Ub did.
Thank you for joining us. If you'd like to hear our interview with Jeff Ryan in its entirety, check out Walk Number 10 on a Walk with Walt podcast, and you can download that on Apple or Spotify.